Good evening, everybody, and welcome to South Carolina Planning for Dam Emergencies Collaborative Technical Assistance, also known as the CTA. This is the Homeowners Dam Safety Technical Information Series, and more specifically, Webinar Session 2, Understanding My Emergency Action Plan, EAP, and Inundation Maps. If you haven't already done so, please be sure to join the audio either via phone or internet through the system directly. Hopefully you see it on the screen because you won't hear me saying this. If you have any technical difficulties throughout the webinar, please email me at alicia@uscs.com. We do want to let everybody know that this webinar is being recorded, and a recorded version will be available for everybody in about a week or so following the webinar. The phone lines will remain muted throughout the duration of the presentation. Please use the chat function to log all of your questions throughout the webinar. They will be addressed during the Q&A session. If your questions are not answered for some reason, or if we run a little bit over on time during the Q&A, we will be sure to address everyone's questions and contact you after the webinar. With that, I am going to hand it over to Mr. John McCain to do our welcome and opening remarks. John?
Yeah, hey, thank you, Alicia, and good evening, everyone. Again, on behalf of South Carolina DHEC, my name's John McCain, and you guys, I'm sure everyone remembers me from the first webinar. I spoke for quite a while. I'll try to be more succinct and this time around and get to my point a little quicker. But I'm glad to have everyone. Your interest, is very, very much appreciated. And I hope everyone has been, in good health and stayed safe since our last, gathering a month ago. So again, just on behalf of DHEC, welcome back, and I hope you find a lot of benefit in tonight's webinar. And I'll let our next presenter give any opening remarks.
John, and this is Preston Wilson. I'm with the National Dam Safety Program, and once again, we're really excited to be working hand in hand with South Carolina Dam Safety Program, and today we're going to get into some really interesting stuff about emergency action planning. FEMA really encourages good emergency action planning, and so we're so excited to partner with them to help deliver this to you today. Even though I will not be speaking a lot, I do. This is one of the things that we really get behind, and we're so excited to do this today. And from that, I'm just going to ask the person, one of my contractors, who kind of set this up, to kind of introduce herself really fast as well.
Hi, everybody. Alicia Zagara. Yes, hi, everybody. Alicia Zagara. We are the outreach contract support for the National Dam Safety Program at headquarters. And if you ever have any issues, need to have information about the CTA program, getting connected to any of the webinars, the recordings, anything like that, please feel free to always reach out to me. You all have my email address and my direct contact. So thank you so much.
Well, good evening. My name is Nick Slevsoft, and I'm with FEMA, but I'm with the National Integration Center. And primarily, our mission is to provide technical assistance across the country on many different topics and subjects regarding emergency management, emergency planning, and issues that are facing emergency managers and their partners. And we've partnered with the National Dam Safety Program about 4 years ago. In bringing our expertise in technical assistance and emergency management, and partnered up with Preston and James Demby and those folks to bring out these technical assistance for dam safety. And like Preston said, we're just really excited about providing this. This particular one is very unique in that we're doing and working with homeowner associations. We've not done that anywhere in the country. So we're just really excited and hoping that we can gain as much knowledge from this as you folks. So thank you.
Molly, do you want to go? You want to introduce yourself? Oh, it's Molly. I'm sorry, folks. How about Jeannie? Jeannie, why don't you introduce yourself next?
Hi, I'm Jeannie Ibsen. I'm a GIS manager for the Office of IT at DHEC. I work primarily with the Bureau of Water and have a strong relationship with our dam safety program. I design web and desktop applications as they relate to watershed dynamics and help to develop methods to expedite our permitting protocols. I've been in GIS for about 20 years, and prior to that, I was the director of a research project looking at the eutrophication of two of our major lakes here in South Carolina.
Hi, my name is Sandra, and I work as an engineer in the dam safety program at DHEC with John and Jeannie. So, welcome everyone.
All right. Preston, did you want to kind of cover some of this introductory material?
Sure. Thanks, John. So today, what we're going to do is we've already went through the welcome and introduction, and like I said, we're going to talk a lot about the emergency action plan process. And in that emergency action plan process, there's the inundation mapping. So it's important that you understand what inundation mapping is, and you get a little bit of understanding of what you're looking at or how these inundation maps are developed. We're going to have you're going to get a lot of information from a live demo from Jeannie from the South Carolina Dam Safety web app, and also we're going to teach you a little bit about dam breach modeling. Then we're going to show you what the tool DSS-Wise Lite is and how South Carolina DHEC used that to help develop some of your inundation map. Then we're going to do a little deeper dive into your emergency action plans, because it's really important for you to know what the emergency action plan is and the components that make up the emergency action plan, so you can really get familiar with your emergency action plan. Then there's a great tool that we're going to briefly go over called the Emergency Innovation Toolbox. And then we're going to have a little bit of closing remarks and talk about some next steps. So talk a little bit about, to refresh us a little bit about the Technical Information Series goals and objectives. The goal is to increase the knowledge and understanding of HOA dam owners related to basic dam safety terminology, technical concepts, and emergency management practices. And there's a lot of goals, and I won't go over all of them today, but you'll have them, and you can refresh them on some of the goals better. But it's on this slide, I'm going to specifically go over objective number 2. So objective number 2 is develop a relationship with your local emergency management office and better understand the roles and responsibility of dam owners and emergency managers. So we specifically want you to get that objective after leaving today. Some more objectives, and you learned a lot about objective 3 last time, the operational maintenance requirements of dams, and then we're going to have some more to talk about objective 4, gain awareness of unique challenges that come with HOA dam ownerships and understanding the tools in place. We'll get into some of that today as it relates to emergency action planning, but we're going to have a lot more of that objective coming up for you as well. All right, so the technical information series, the first Tuesday of every month from 5:30 to 7:30. We've done one right there, Living with Dams or Your Risk. We're doing two, Understanding My Emergency Action Plan and Inundation Maps. But June 2nd, we're going to have risk and communication strategies for dam emergencies. So we're really going to talk about what are those risks and how do you communicate those risks and the purpose of dam emergencies. And we're going to get into how you communicate those risks, outside the emergency concept. July 7th, we're going to do unique considerations for HOA dam owners. That objective, really hitting that objective number 4. Have some people to come in who have been in your shoes and who have tried certain elements, and have them talk to you to give you some best practices there. So that's on July 7th. So a little overview of this session number 2. And to do this, I'm going to start asking a question because I said something in the last session, and feel free to put it in your chat to answer this question. But I said, who said this? Planning is worthless, but the planning process is everything. And you guys can start putting that in your chat. And I just want to see that's one of your little tests that we're going to have, see if you actually paid attention of the last session. But what we really think the emergency action planning process is very important. And to do that, it's one of the outcomes we want to better understand your emergency action plan, understand how to read and what those inundation maps are and those things to support those inundation maps. Hear about DSS Wise Light and how South Carolina DHEC is using them to help develop your inundation mapping. Learn how emergency action plans relate and should be integrated into the local emergency management plans, and that's a key. That's a key link there because you're not by yourself. Better understand the roles and responsibility of dam owners, emergency managers. It's very important to understand people's role and responsibility in dam risk management and learn about additional resources and best practice for preventing and reducing risk. So now I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Nick, and he's going to give you some really good information on the planning process, which he started in the last session. Nick.
All right, thank you, Preston. And we're going to talk about, oops, I'm going backwards. We're going to talk about the emergency action plan and the process and and why it's important and how that's shared with the community. First of all, what we're looking at as a document is emergency action plan, which is a document, but as Preston discussed, it's the process in getting to that and the work that's put into it. The planning process is what's important. And what we're talking about here is to meet that requirement, that regulatory requirement, having an emergency action plan, but more importantly, is having a viable working plan for your dam and for your communities that if something happens that you could have a good outcome. And here in this slide you'll see the elements we're going to be speaking to here in my presentation, going from emergency action planning all the way through the updates. So the first point in the plan is going through that process. It's like Preston said, is making that work, and how do you do that? So the first thing you need to do is do you have an emergency action plan? If you don't, this is where you start putting one together. In that planning process, you're going to be looking at conducting regular inspections, and forming operational and maintenance plan, and looking at the partnerships that you have with dam owners upstream, downstream, or the communications and potential collaboration for the expertise and equipment sharing, those kinds of things. And for the main point here is knowing your emergency management support systems and functions and public safety community that would support you in the event of an emergency. So in the planning process, we're looking at identifying things that happen before an event. You know, what do you need to do? Do you have that disaster planning process? And having a disaster plan in place is it like you train like you fight and you fight like you train. So that's you know, going to be very important as you go through the process and looking at having an exercise and training, and including the partners that you'd be identifying for perhaps DHEC, the County Emergency Management, Fire, Police, EMS, and those folks, and incorporate that into your intervention toolbox. And we'll be speaking to that in a little bit, into your EAP. So we're going to poll the audience here. You should have a screen that shows yes or no. Do you know your emergency manager? We're going to give you about a minute to answer that, and if you can answer, we'd appreciate that. Okay, I think we have the numbers here. So we're going to the next slide. And we're looking at an emergency process and what happens in during a threat for an emergency. What happens with that emergency and what's going to happen with the dam owners, emergency responders, and those folks. Dam owners are responsible for knowing the condition of the dams and initiate the emergency notifications. And your emergency action plan is the owner's manual, as John has said many times, in helping you identify the severity of the problem. So the key here is that you are going to be responsible for certain functions, but you know, you do have an ability to have a number of partners that are going to help you do that, and we'll speak to that as we go through the slides here. So again, looking at that emergency threat, an emergency happens, and your plan is going to identify, first of all, that you're a high hazard dam, if that's the case, and then you're going to initiate notifications of people or homes and businesses, imminent failure. This is a major responsibility under the legislation that you see here. An emergency action plan must be in place and current with phone numbers for at-risk properties. Now, with that said, this is where you can partner up with your local emergency providers. In many cases across the country, and I know it applies to South Carolina too, there are certain laws that regulate and govern how warnings and evacuations are given out. So that's where you really need to partner with those local emergency services to understand that process. Even though you have that responsibility, you may not be legally allowed to issue that kind of warning or threat of imminent failure. So that's something you have to work with your local communities. In many cases, dam owners have worked with emergency management agencies and within the 911 centers that if something happens that an evacuation order or an imminent threat would be issued through the 911 center. So that's basically what you need to do is to get that, you want to make sure that information gets out quickly, but also that it gets out to the right people. So the reminder here, the day of the emergency is too late to implement a reverse 911 or code red. It takes time and teamwork and cooperation to get that notification set up out in advance. And that can be tested too. So it's not something that you have to look at only in the use of an emergency. You can test that with your community and see how it works. At the end of the day, what we're looking here is making sure that you have boots on the ground, that people within the community are going to be able to support you and to help respond to that emergency. So again, with the emergency action planning process, you're looking at notification is made to all the partners, the 911 contact, if that's how it's set up with your organizations. that emergency management and first responders are there to respond to whatever the case may be, road closures, evacuations, or whatever those folks are, and that you have the dam owner's engineer is connected with the local community, and like John says, DHEC dam safety staff are notified as well. Again, this is looking at the whole system, but looking at boots on the ground, and it's linking this process that you're putting in place within your EAP is linking you with your local, state organizations that would be responding normally, and being able, just making sure you have a plan in place that the right people are notified in an appropriate time. So let's say you had an emergency. What happens? And you're looking at a post-event recovery and restoration. What you're going to look at, are you going to be replacing that dam or fixing it? And what do you need to do to make that happen? And getting your data collected, obviously, is one of the biggest points here. And making sure you have an engineer conduct a complete inspection of the dam. These are points that you would be putting in the planning process, evaluating your water depths downstream, working with engineer for repair construction, and of course, applying to DHEC for permitting repairs. Again, this is all part of that planning process that you have pointed out with your within your EAP. Also, within the post-event of recovery and restoration, you're looking at replacing or repairing the dam, whatever the case may be. But you're also looking at lessons learned. You know, what went well, what didn't go well with your plan, and this is where you can sit down as a community with you folks as being dam owners, but also the emergency service personnel, emergency management agency, downstream organizations, Department of Transportation, whoever might have been involved with that particular event, can come to the table and discuss that. We call that an after-action report, where we sit down and actually review all what happened during that response, and what can we do to improve on things, and what went well, what went right. So you'd be able to establish a process to identify that, looking at better communications, perhaps, and enhancing preparedness and responding to dam safety threats and emergencies. That's all part of the updating process that you're looking at for the dam, and some of the issues that you might be looking at when you have that. Now, let me go back one. You may not have an emergency every year, so what do you do then? What we are recommending is that people review their dam or the EAPs on at least an annual basis, and walk their partners through and making sure you have everything tightened up, names, numbers, and those kinds of things are all up to date in that EAP, because you never know when you're going to use it. It may be years before that happens, or it may be next month, so you don't know. But what you want to do is you want to make sure you have that information updated and ready to go if something does happen. So the process that I just spoke to, it's an ongoing process. It's cyclical. We're going from emergency planning all the way updating the plans. And again, just reiterating what Preston said, planning is everything. Most of the time, nothing happens, but this is where you have that you go through that process and review it on an annual basis. And if something does happen, you have that already in place and ready to go. So we're going to speak a little bit to understanding emergency management organizations and functions. And this chart this chart you have seen in front of you, organizational chart, is very similar to organizational charts across the country. It gets more specific, obviously, as you go to a specific municipality or government. But you have state emergency management organizations that are out there to help support the counties and the cities, and depending on how the state set up their emergency management legislation. But they would be providing support to the counties, and then the counties are then, in this case, would be helping to coordinate the response. Understand, the Emergency Management Agency is not in charge. They are merely there to help facilitate the process. They're sort of like a conductor in facilitating that response and making sure that everybody's getting notification. Everybody, the biggest thing is everybody's getting information. In an emergency, it's one of the key issues that we speak to is that we need to know what's going on through the County Emergency Management Agency. County Emergency Management organizations have emergency operations centers and EOCs. And in those EOCs, this is where you have a lot of the coordination functions take place. So you have fire, you have police, you have EMS, you have medical health. All these organizations, public works, that sit in an emergency operations center, so they would have be able to reach out to their respective areas and then coordinate their information with the county. This is where you can get hooked into as well. You're going to be a risk to the community if you have that dam. And emergency managers are going to want to know how much of a risk, what's going to happen, and that EAP that you're putting together or revising is something that emergency managers really would like to have a copy of so that they could do part of their process. So they have to do risk management. They have to look and see how they're going to be doing the responses. But as they go through the process, understand that they're doing this and getting that coordination so that these organizations can be partnering with you as a dam owner to have those resources available. The key to understanding emergency management and what the county does is that it already has in place a lot of the functional operations in coordination that needed for a dam emergency. So you don't have to go out and invent that wheel. It's already in place, and something once you get connected and hooked into, it's a resource for you. The key point for them is that they need to know who the dam point of contact is. Is it in your HOA? Is it a person? Is it a position? Whoever that is, that you need one point of contact or POC that is working with the dam planning, dam safety planning and related issues, so that they can coordinate schedules and maintenance activities. Knowing that EAP inside and out. It's again, your EAP is a document, but you have to have somebody there who has knowledge of what's going to happen, who they have to contact, and that EAP, once that document is out, it's really a good reference for people who don't know what's going to happen within an organization, so they have at least something to follow. But that POC is going to be really important to have that knowledge, and they can provide a report on conditions of the dam to the fully HOA on at least on an annual basis. And my belief is that not just having a first name basis with a DHEC regional engineer, but they need to have first name basis, be on a first name basis with other public safety officials within the county, within their community, as a fire, police, EMS, emergency management, and any other key partners that might be affected if you have a full-blown emergency within the community. So that's the kind of the emergency management side, and we'll go on to the next, and up to you, John.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Nick. Appreciate it. So I'll take over, and we're going to talk a bit about inundation mapping. I think we hit on it some in the first webinar. So I realized, so as soon as we get to a slide with an audience poll, that our timer starts. So I'm going to start with the audience, the question to the audience: yes or no? Have you ever heard of GIS or DSS-WISE Lite? and GIS stands for Geographic Information Systems, and DSS-Wise Light is they're both pieces of software that we use. So let us know, answer the poll, and let us know if you've heard of them. So dam breach inundation studies are critical in both for DHEC for the dam safety program to assign a hazard classification for a dam, but also in developing your EAP as well, and to communicate to emergency management officials and other folks what areas could potentially need to be evacuated in the event of a dam failure, and what would be the consequences of of your dam failing. Let's see. So here are results. So actually the majority of you folks have heard of the two pieces of software, DSS-Wise Light or GIS, I guess at least one of them. And about a third have not, but hopefully after today you'll be introduced to them at least, and just understand that those are tools that the dam safety program heavily relies on in the way in our day-to-day operations. It's really been a game-changing technology for us. So we'll talk about that some. So moving on, again, this is a rehash, I guess, from the first webinar, but how DHEC assigns a hazard potential classification. And what I really want to focus on is, how the modeling software is a major factor, how that software that we use to simulate dam failure, and combined with our engineering judgment, just to stress that it takes an engineer that understands the principles there, the hydraulic principles, the hydrologic principles, and also how the software, the model, how it works, the inner workings is key. So that's one critical piece, and then how you how you analyze those results from the model to determine what improved property downstream of the dam could potentially be impacted, and that's where the GIS analysis comes into play, and then again, the input from the dam owner or the dam owner's engineer, both are factored into our assigning a hazard class, because the dam owner knows the local area, knows whether that building that we only see as from an aerial photograph, the dam owner knows if that's an abandoned home or a barn or or what have you. So we rely on that input from the dam owner and the technical input from the dam owner's engineer. All that is valuable. And so moving on, again, we want to reiterate from the previous webinar that the hazard class of your dam that we determine, that DHEC determines, has nothing to do with the condition of your dam. The hazard class is purely based on the impacts your dam will have on the downstream, downstream properties and downstream, population at risk. So, the best built, strongest, most impressive dam in the world can still be a high hazard structure. The condition of your dam is reflected in your inspection rating. And so again, as we talked about a bit in the first presentation, your risk is a combination of your hazard class and your condition, the condition of your dam, and the downstream impacts. So whereas hazard class is purely based on what's downstream, the risk that's what the condition of your dam really has an impact on. And so inundation maps are the result of this. And another poll, if you can, let us know if you've seen a current inundation map for your dam, yes or no. So the inundation maps represent, the areas that from our modeling, and the calculations and the breach analysis depicts the potential areas that would flood or be inundated should there be a release, an uncontrollable release from your dam, from your reservoir. And the way we depict these, we depict this with a color scheme where red is equal to the deepest flooding, and blue is the shallowest. And so these are the maps you would see in your EAP if DHEC provides it or prepares that map. That's what you would see. So here's, we'll see what our poll results have to say. And wow, okay, that's pretty impressive. So most of you have seen your inundation map or a current inundation map. About a fifth of you have not. So we definitely want you to, that's definitely something to correct to make sure you can review it. And in fact, Jeannie, when she covers her section here shortly, may show you an easy way to check it tonight if you feel like it. So moving on, again, like we were saying, the red on your inundation maps represents, the deepest flooding. So, if there was a home, if there was a house or structure in that red area, that's a sign that, significant flooding and potentially a risk for loss of life could exist downstream. And so, Jeannie, I will turn it over to you to give that tour, and maybe you can explain how these people can look at their inundations pretty easily.
All right. Thank you, John. Well, good evening, and again, I'm Jeannie. I'll be presenting a demo on the South Carolina Dams and Inundation web application. So the tools in this application are intuitive, but you do have help that's available under the info button that you would see in the upper right-hand corner. In the About section is a description of the purpose of the web application, methods used in creating the inundation areas, and then layer details and an explanation of how to use these tools. To the right of the info button, you have an overview button, which will show you where you are relative to a smaller scale map. You have a full screen button, a print button, and a save session button, which I'll show you later on in this demo. Most of the tools are found at the bottom center of the application. The Legend tool provides information about the symbology of what is currently displayed on the map. The layer list lists all of the layers that are available for display, including the dam classifications, inundation boundaries, parameters, traffic counts. A lot of times we'll use precipitation data. So all of that is available for you. When you click on a layer, the symbology for that layer comes up, and then the ellipsoid, or the three buttons that are right next to it, they offer you interactions with that layer. You can change transparency, you can view it in an attribute table, and so on and so forth. If you notice, as you turn on the layers in the layer list, it automatically populates the symbology in the legend. The tools, any of the tools can be moved around anywhere in the application, and you close them by clicking on the X on the right upper hand corner. Now each layer has got a pop-up. If you click on it, you'll see information about that site. If you've got several layers turned on in that layer list, the pop-ups for all the layers will appear. sequentially as if they intersect that exact point where you clicked. Now, some of the pop-ups will provide links to additional information. So if you needed parcel data information, here this is the county boundary, and you would click on the parcel data, and it would take you to Horry County's parcel site, so you could find information about your particular parcel. As John was mentioning, one of the really interesting layers on this is this inundation area. This is actually a composite or merging of three images. And one represents the time of water arrival, the depth of the water, and then the elevation of the site that would be impacted if there was a dam failure. This is a pretty large data set. So if you see it's grayed out, so you'll have to zoom in order for it to appear. So I'm going to use down here at the bottom a bookmark that I previously created to zoom in to an area of interest. Well, all right. Well, I'll tell you what, I'll use that to show you how to do a bookmark. I do know the area that I want to go to, though. So with this, we're going to look at two dams. One is 3761, and one is 3774. I'm going to zoom in. And what you see are the boundaries of the inundation area. I'm going to wait for a little while on this. It does look like the inundation areas are coming up, but for some reason, they're being slow in displaying. Now, these servers are the servers that we've been using for the COVID pandemic as well. So I'm going to leave this up, and I'm going to come back to it in just a second. I'm not getting any error messages why it wouldn't come up. So I'm not quite sure what's going on, but we'll come back and we'll revisit this. There's a tool here for your base map. And what this does is allows you to change your base map to imagery, to streets, back to topography, whatever it is that you're interested in finding out about. There's a filter tool that you can use to show statewide dams that are high hazard, significant hazard, and low hazard. So I'm going to go ahead and turn on the high hazard dams, and you'll see just those high hazards. You can also zoom into your area, your particular dam area. So I'm going to do a query, say, on dam D007, and I'm going to go to the boundaries for that. Make sure that they're both turned on, and then I'm going to turn them both on, and it zooms to, excuse me, that area and the inundation boundary. Now, you can also create a custom filter. So as I had mentioned before, one of the things that we use a lot is the quantitative precipitation forecast information. So I'm going to zoom out here, and we use this to look at cumulative precipitation forecast for 72 hours. And this is the symbology that's related to that forecast. And you can see that we've had relatively little rain here. Normally, when we're looking at rainfall, we're looking at anywhere from 4 to 6 to 7 inches. But for this demonstration, I'm just going to go ahead and show you how to select a smaller subset. So what we want to do is come into your custom and pick up your quantitative precipitation forecast, cumulative forecast for 72 hours, and then you add an expression here. So the number that you want that's unique in this particular case would be, we'll say 0.25. And then you'll see that it limits it to only those areas that had 0.25 inches over the last 72 hours. So we'll come back up here, clear out this separate dam, and go ahead and show just our high hazard dams that fall within that area. Go ahead and close this. The next tool I wanted to show you was the Select tool. So with the Select tool, you can select a subset of the data if you would, and you can do that either by rectangle, polygon, or circle. So here I'm going to use the circle and just click on some of our high hazard dams. You'll see that it selected 75. It lists the 75, and it also lets you export those data, which is important sometimes for our listings. You can see them listed down here in the dam hazard classification. We have 538 features, high hazard dams in the state, and 75 of them are selected. What I did is I just opened up the table, and you can open up the table clicking on the table attribute, just opening and closing by clicking on it and unclicking. Then I'll clear that. The other thing I wanted to show you too is that you can actually select on this feature that we filtered out. So you can see that this has the 72-hour. I can go ahead and click on that. And the important part, I'm going to show this to you later on in the application, is that by clicking on that, it actually allows me to sort it, to create a layer, to add a marker. So I'm going to export this as a GeoJSON. That's a GIS jargon term, which just means spatial data. I'm going to click on it, and it downloads a GeoJSON file, and that file contains both spatial and tabular data. And I'm going to use this later on in this demonstration. Go ahead and clear that, clear out the select. The Add Data button. Now, the Add Data button allows you to add additional data that's not included in that layer list. You can go to the content and you can search for ArcGIS Online. We use a lot of the National Weather Service station data. So I'm going to search for that, and it comes up with everything that's available online through the National Weather Service. I'm going to add something that's kind of bold in nature. It's not the most aesthetically pleasing, but it'll let you see what it means when you're adding data through this. And I'll go back out. When you add, this is the gridded surface weather forecast. When you add something from online, it also adds it to the layer list. So you see the information. To remove it, you simply click Remove. Another way of adding data is through a URL. We have at DHEC a watershed atlas that contains a lot of information about the Bureau of Water. So if I wanted to, say, load our permits in there for NPDES, I could go to this application and look at the description for it. And even though there's an error here, that's just saying that the service directory is disabled. It gives you the URL. So you want to copy that URL, go back to your dam safety application, and paste that in there. Now, if you're not used to doing this, they give you sample URLs of things that you are looking for that people would provide. And this kind of format is provided by lots and lots of county and state and federal agencies. And then you add it. When you add it, it adds the permits. I'm going to zoom in. And you can zoom in by using these navigational tools. This will be a zoom in, a zoom out. This will bring you to the state. This will bring you to your house, and this will bring you to a previous extent. Well, now that I've added the NPDES, I can click on the site. I can see the information about the site that was presented in the earlier application, and I can see where they are in relationship to my dams. And then finally, you can add a shapefile, a zip shapefile, CSV, or KMLs from Google Earth. So it gives you lots and lots of options. The next tool I wanted to talk about is the Draw tool. This allows you to add text. So if you wanted to save this and mark it up for somebody to see, you could add different location marks, you could add arrows, lots of different things that you can do with this, and then save it later on to send to somebody. And if you've made a mistake or if you want to get rid of something that you've added, you just click the undo and it'll release that. There's a measurement tool, and you can use that to determine measurements in any units of interest. I'm going to choose miles here. You click once, you click a second time, and it gives you the measurement. If you click a double time, it'll give you a cumulative measurement. Double clicking will end it and clear it. Oops, excuse me, and clear. The next thing I wanted to show was the screening tool. Now this lets you do some interesting things to generate reports. You can select an area of interest by typing in an address, by drawing shapes, by adding coordinates, or a zip file, shape file, and then selecting a buffer for that area of interest. And it generates a report for you to download. I kind of want to walk you through an example of how we use a combination of these tools to get what we need. For example, say you want to look at high hazard dams that fall within that filtered area that we have of rainfall. Well, first of all, recall that the precipitation that I had, I used that filter tool to select just this 0.25 inches of rainfall over a 72-hour. I then used that select tool to download that as a GeoJSON or a spatial file. So in this tool, you'll see that what it asks you to do is actually to add a shape file. A shape file and a GeoJSON file are kind of one and the same, except you have to convert them. If you have GIS software, they have tools for you to convert that. If you do not, they have a lot of geocoder tools that are available that are free online, that all you'd have to do is upload your GeoJSON, ask it to convert it to a shape file, and it would download a zipped file. So here, I'm going to ask it to, I've done that with the file that we just had. I'm going to ask it to load that zip file that I have. And in this particular case, I'm not going to put a buffer distance around it. Okay, because I want to just see those that are within that rainfall area. To show that that is an actual zip file, I'm going to turn off our precipitation. Now that's exactly what I sent up to look at, so it looks exactly the same, but it's a shape file that I can now generate a report. So as you recall, we had 538 high hazard dams. This one now uses that shape file, selects the high hazard dams within that, and gives me a list. And then I can then export that. And we use this a lot during times of flood events when we wanted to select dams that we need to go and visit, we need to do assessments with. With this, the next tool is a driving tool, and this is simply, you can zoom in, you can find a place from one point to the next point, and it gives you the driving time and the directions to get that, get to there. We can use that when we're doing our assessments. And there's a Near Me tool, so you can put in your address, and you can find out sites that are near you with anywhere from a 0 to a 15-mile buffer. And then the bookmark that I told you about was what I had just added before, where if I wanted to save this particular spot, I could just come in here, bookmark it, and let me come back in here again and test it again and add it and go to it. The last thing, not the last thing, but one of the things I wanted to talk to you about was the Save Session button. This Save Session button allows you to come in here and to actually save what you've had in here, like the hellos, the me's, the directions and stuff. This is really unusual for most web applications because usually once you clear your browser, once you get out of there, it clears everything for you, and anything that you added, any text you added or anything, like if you wanted to share something with John or any of us at DHEC, would be gone. This way you could actually save your session, save it to a file, and then that file that's downloaded on your computer, you can send to us and we can see what it is that you wanted to show us. One of the main things that I wanted to show you now was this inundation. And I'm going to come back here and we're going to revisit that before I let go. Okay, so if it doesn't come up, if you would give me just a second. What I'm going to do, and this is a good thing about web application. Oh, no, it is coming up. Okay. I'm still going to show you this anyways, because this is probably a really good thing to happen to our demo. If something hangs up or something stops in the middle of your work while you're looking at your site, just refresh the application. Just clear it and refresh it, and you'll be good to go. Okay, so let me come down here to a couple of dams over by Lake Mary and Lake Moultrie. Two dams that I worked in when I was younger, so they're near and dear to my heart. I want to turn off this filter because I want to see all of our dams. I'll come back in there. So this was what John was getting at when he was talking about looking at your individual dams. So you could do this tonight if you wanted to. We'll just give it a little bit of time to open up here. Okay, so here we have two dams that we're looking at. The low hazard dams, and then these are the inundation areas. So we have a low hazard dam, D3761, and we have another one, D3774. What these inundate, you have your boundaries. Now these boundaries are just the exterior of the boundaries. If you want to see your arrival time, your depth, and your elevation, you're clicking on this like salmon color transparency one. And as you're moving down, you'll see your time in hours, your depth in feet, and your elevation in feet. And rightfully so, as you move down, your arrival time should increase and your depth of water will decrease. One thing I wanted to point out to you here is the circle, the square. This is showing the footprint that's associated with the inundation of that dam. If I were to click on this dam, you're going to see another inundation come up, another box to represent the inundation associated with that dam. As with the dam above it, as you go downstream, you'll see, here, let me start upstream here. You'll see your time changing. Now, the unit of measure, what you'll have to look at are 30 square meters. So every 30 square meters, you have a new time, depth, and elevation. One thing that I wanted to show you is in some of your areas, in this particular case, well, actually in a lot of yours, you're going to have inundation areas that overlap. So when you're looking at your site, make sure that you see, like if you're dam owner of D3774, this is the elevation or the time and the depth and the elevation associated with that site. If I go to the pop-up, if they overlap, it's going to give me two pop-ups. So now I'm going to see the elevation, the time, the depth, and the elevation for the second site. So make sure you're checking your name here to make sure that you're looking at the elevation and the parameters associated with your particular dam. The other thing I wanted to explain is in your EAPs, you have a very nicely colored, the dark red is the deeper areas and the blues are the shallower areas. You don't see that here. And the reason that you don't see here is because this is a statewide coverage of inundation areas. And so we have lots and lots of areas to overlap. If we were trying to overlap that type of coloring for inundation dam, it would be overwhelming and very confusing. Okay, so I think that's it. Thank you so much for your attention, and I will send this back to John.
Hey, okay. Thank you, Jeannie. That was great. You guys can see we have very smart and talented people working with us at DHEC. Jeannie, Jeannie is,
Hey, John,
that's her baby.
we are getting some feedback. I'm not sure if it's from your line or if someone else is unmuted. It looks like it just stopped.
Okay. And I do know I'm going to try and move ahead pretty quick, but I want to just shout out to Jeannie. That web application is her baby. She's built it, and then we are very proud of it. And it's a tool we use every day. So I hope y'all will also learn to use it and see the benefit of it. So anyway, let me kind of press on. So dam breach modeling in a general sense, the practice of dam breach modeling, not specifically how we do it at DHEC, but just in general is a science or a practice that really has three main components. The engineering judgment that I spoke about kind of earlier. The technical approach, basically how you're going to attack the problem, and then the key concerns. What really do you need the model to? What are your concerns from, like, are there homes, or what do you need the model to really show you? What resolution, things like that you need to get out of your model. So when we talk about the technical approach, we have to consider things such as, what is the water level at the time of failure in the pond? Do we model the failure as a sunny day scenario, or maybe a rainy day, a situation with precipitation and what we call inflow, which is, you have water coming into your pond. Not just what's already there, but you've got additional water, coming in to your pond from rainfall. And, so we have to kind of make a decision. Are we modeling a sunny day failure, which there is no inflow, or do we model a rainy day type scenario where there's inflow? And additionally, depending on, that there also may be flooding downstream too that can impact, what the result looks like from your dam failing if there are already flooding conditions downstream. So then another thing we have to consider is, how do we model the actual mode of failure? Is it a progressive event that occurs over a time period? Or is it an instantaneous failure? The dam just, gives way. And we kind of showed that, I believe, in the first webinar, the two, where instantaneous failures can occur. So if it's a progressive type failure, then we have to look at the type of failure. Is it an overtopping event or a piping event? Those are kind of the two main, categories. And then if it is a progressive, where do we locate our breach location? Depending on, generally the most conservative and safest location is where the water is deepest. That's where we would normally say the dam breaches, but that's not always, that sometimes you have to look at multiple locations to make sure that, where the dam breaches, it could have an impact on what gets flooded downstream, especially things that are close to the dam. And then moving on, so overtopping, again, we talked about how that's a type of progressive failure. And, that's where, you say, we started with a dam at this, a dam across this area, and over time, the dam starts to overtop, eventually, it's going to start to erode, and then over time that erosion will enlarge, more material is carried away until finally the dam breaches all the way through. all the way to the bottom of the to the natural ground there, and so we don't know how long that progression is going to take. We don't know, it could be minutes or hours, maybe days, and so that's another uncertainty that comes into modeling dam failures. And again, here's kind of a step-by-step showing a overtopping type failure as it eventually starts, erosion, shallow erosion. That erosion gets deeper and deeper until, basically by the time, you have you basically have a very shallow, very thin amount of material left holding back water. And then that finally breaks through and you have an uncontrolled release. So again, from A to B to C to D to E to F here, it's anyone's guess how long that's going to take. And also between, what's your ultimate width of breach, how wide your breach is ultimately, those are unknowns. With piping, it's a little different where, piping generally starts from some kind of penetration through the dam, whether that's maybe it's a tree root, maybe it's an animal burrow, but as water flows through that pipe, that penetration, it erodes, and that opening and gets larger and larger. At one point, you're left with almost a tunnel through your dam that has a roof, so that there's still a roof intact, but eventually that roof collapses, and then it kind of resembles similar to your overtopping failure, and then the breach is all the way to the top of the dam, and it begins to enlarge in width at that point. And so again, we don't know the timing, and we don't know the ultimate width of that breach when it's completed. And again, showing how that can happen from A to B to C to D. You can see the roof of that piping area, and then when the roof collapses, you basically have a full breach, and then the breach gets wider until it reaches its ultimate width. And so that's the challenge when you're modeling breaches and doing inundation modeling. So DHEC, maybe you're asking how DHEC models it. We do the sunny day breach, and so maybe you're asking, is that really the worst case scenario? And so my response is no, it's not the absolute worst case scenario. There are other scenarios, such as, like I was saying, a rainy day event where there's been precipitation, where there may be flooding going on downstream and inflow coming into your pond. But that's a difficult thing for DHEC to do, to come up with those. It's not impossible, but it's time consuming and resource heavy. So we've settled on a sunny day scenario with a full pool of water, and then the dam is basically removed instantaneously. So an instantaneous failure. And that's in our experience is a good conservative method or scenario that we can do easily and quickly, and with at very low cost to the state. So we've done that for for virtually all of our dams. It's what we do like about it is the sunny day failure. It really shows exactly what the consequences of your dam or of a dam failing. When you have flooding, when you have rainfall, that does tend to muddy the water, if you pardon the pun, but it makes it harder to know the impact of the dam in isolation. The sunny day really shows the impact of your dam in isolation. And then the key concerns when we're doing these models, what are we trying to, what are we really concerned about? Is it potential loss of life or property damage, maybe infrastructure impacts? And maybe the dam is an industrial lagoon of some sort, like, a waste containing wastewater or containing mining byproducts that are harmful to the environment. So those are things we have to look at. What do we want to? What are the potential consequences? Then what data do we want? What is the critical data to get out of the model? Is it flow rates? Is it velocities? Is it depths? Then the budget. How much money do we have? If we have a copious amount of funds, which DHEC does not, but if we had a huge budget, we would do very, very high precision, very complex, modeling, where the inputs are collected from surveys and going out in the field, and the model is set up with extreme precision. That takes time, and time equals money. And then again, time. How soon do we need the result? If we have a dam failing and we don't have a month or even a day, we need results in minutes. We can run a very quick and dirty model, and then just maybe just apply a margin of safety around that area just to evacuate people, and we can get people out of harm's way without going through that extreme level of detail. So engineering judgment, again, what level of conservatism is needed? Do we know enough about the dam to predict that mode of failure? And such as, do we need to analyze multiple possibilities or multiple scenarios and see which is the worst case? Are our input parameters logical, or do they look weak, strange and need to be verified in the field? And then lastly, what information maybe that only the dam owner could provide is needed. And so briefly, I'll talk about DSS-WISE Lite, which is the model that DHEC uses. It's hydraulic modeling software that is specifically designed for dam break inundations. It is free to the state, and really, free, free to anyone that's using it. It's fast. That's the beauty of it, is we get results generally in a matter of minutes. It can be set up in a matter of minutes, and results are available in a matter of minutes. It's internet-based, so there's no software to install and make, keep current and worry about, updates to software. The interface is simple and user-friendly, and the inputs are minimal. Like I said, it can be set up and run, and results available, in minutes. So why do we use DSS-WISE Lite? So it has preloaded databases that help keep those user inputs to a minimum. One of the big things, the big deal for us, is we have South Carolina has statewide terrain model for, at a high resolution, a 3-meter or roughly 10-foot resolution. That helps them tell the model where the water will flow, where there are bumps and hills, and what the slopes are, and whether a road, what the elevation of a road surface is. We have another big one is the USGS National Land Cover Database, which that tells the model, is water, what kind of resistance will the water meet when it flows over an area? Is it a forest or is it a parking lot? And so these databases make it, minimize the amount of input and help us to get the results fast. So, and then geographic information systems, that's the software that helps us to analyze the results once the model, once we get those results from the model. And GIS allows the analysis of elevations, flood depths, velocities to determine the impacts of the dam breaching on downstream areas. It also allows us to create those maps, those color-coded maps that you can put in your EAP and share with, maybe share with emergency management professionals. So it's a very powerful tool. And here's an example of the results of a DSS-WISE-like model that have been that GIS allows us to visualize. So in this case, the orange line represents the dam, and the white grid represents the cells in the model. So the model works on a cell-by-cell basis and calculates, runs its calculations on every cell, giving and you get as a result. The results are the depth, their velocity, arrival time, all those things for every cell in your downstream of your dam. So in this case, we're looking at depth. So in this case, we're looking at velocities, and so that's and then when we're trying to assign determine the hazard class, determine the potential impacts, we look at where, say, roads or infrastructure, homes, et cetera, and the depths of flooding. So in this case, a roadway is inundated. So we want to know how many cars per day, how busy is that roadway? And also we have some structures. Are they habitable structures? So those are the kind of considerations and things we have to look at. And we can even, if you look at the 10-foot resolution of our results, we can see, for say a home, what the depth is, for every 10 feet. So, maybe on the northwest side here, maybe this is the carport or the garage where we got 1.7 to 2.4 feet. But further on the south side, it's only 0.8 feet, less than a foot. So we could look and see, do we expect the flooding to actually enter the living space of this home? And that may be how we determine, that the dam is not a high hazard potential dam, but maybe a significant. It may not represent loss of life, but it could maybe do some damage to the property, maybe flood the garage, et cetera. So those are that's what GIS gives us the ability to do. And so dam breach models are utilized, heavily for hazard potential classification, for developing EAPs and the maps, and the plans that are part of your EAP, spillway capacity design, risk, as we've talked about, evacuation planning for sure, and also mitigation planning. And mitigation is, like maybe the model shows a home is at risk. It may be easier just to purchase that home and relocate the residents to mitigate the risk. And that's the kind of thing that flood mitigation planning can help do. Lowering impacts to infrastructure. And ultimately, our main primary goal is reducing potential loss of life. So I'll turn it over to Sandra, who's going to talk about understanding your EAP.
Thanks, John. So welcome, everyone. We're going to go through understanding what an EAP is. And it really is a formal document that assists a dam owner. And it defines the process that Nick spoke to, and it'll guide and assist you when you have an unusual or emergency condition at your dam. And it's required for all your high and significant hazard categories. And that's what Jeannie and John has spoken to with inundation mapping and breach modeling. So low hazard folks, just breathe easy, stay with us. We've got some great resources available to you that DHEC can share. Polling. Last time we asked everyone to find their EAP, and we just wanted to know, did you find it? So the purpose of your EAP is really to reduce it's really an owner's manual, if you will. It gives you guidance or steps to reduce the loss of human life and risk to injury should your dam fail. And Last webinar, we also reminded you that it is your responsibility to detect unusual or emergency conditions at your dam, and then follow through with the plan if necessary. So I guess I need to wait just a little bit and to find out if you have your EAP, but if you do not, just breathe easy about that as well. You can contact DHEC, and we probably have one on file for you. So I don't know if I get to see the results of this, but it looks like all of you have your EAP, which is great. So why do we need an EAP? Well, it's really because of regulations 72-3, 72-4, and it defines the minimum standards under the regulation, which is first that DHEC will provide a format sheet or a template, and you can actually go above and beyond this with your submittal. The second thing is that it is a written document which will spell out specific actions that you will do. It spells out the notification plans if things go wrong with your dam, and this really fulfills your responsibility to notify your downstream property owners. So there are a couple of components that you need to kind of keep in mind. But first, I wanted to say, if you have too much content with not the right kind of information, it will bog you down in an emergency. And the second thing is, if you don't have enough content, then it won't be effective in handling an emergency. So we want in our EAPs to have essential information about a dam, and we want that downstream impact hazard class component in your that Jeannie and John spoke to. We also want to define our roles and responsibilities, as well as have resources available to know what the condition of our dam is. And most importantly, we want that emergency contact information. So let's roll up our sleeves and let's start to make a plan. And as Nick said before, we really do need a point of contact during an emergency, because your primary contact is probably going to have to make a lot of decisions, and sometimes very quickly. And they will have to communicate and coordinate in handling that emergency. We also need to review those inundation maps to really help you know what to put in your plan. And you really do need to look at it on a yearly basis. And for those of you who have a plan, this is your chance to review your document, make sure things are updated, and reflect what conditions are now. So today, for those of you who are seeing a new template, you are more than welcome to reach out to us and to incorporate some of these parts into your plan. We're not going to be discussing everything that we include now, but this is based off of the federal guidelines established by FEMA's Publication 64, Emergency Action Planning, and that is a document that guides you through the components of an EAP. But today, we're really going to focus in on South Carolina DHEC's template and how to complete that EAP. So first, I want you to know, it is your decision how you fill this out. But we wanted to let you know that all of these items in red that you see on these 2 pages can be pre-populated from DHEC records. So the signature page. So as the dam owner can actually be the HOA or POA, which can act as the legal entity as long as someone with authority signs this document, such as your president of your HOA. The second thing is that unless this is signed, it's not considered in effect. And what that means, that signature really does show that you have reviewed this owner's manual, this EAP. You've accepted your role and responsibility in an emergency. But if you haven't signed it, you're really considered in violation of the reg. Now, I just want to also point out that just because you have an older template does not mean you're in violation. but we do want you to incorporate as much of this as you can because it's a really good resource for you during an emergency. So this is your dam owner information. And we know you know who you are and where you live. But we look at this document for two different reasons. The first reason being for inspection needs. DHEC reaches out to you every 2 years to come and conduct an inspection. And we will look at this document and pull from this document to set up that appointment. The second need is an emergent need. And this is when your emergency support team will reach out to the people on this list. So you really do need to prioritize the people on this list. Your point of contact really should be the first person on the list. And if you have an owner or operator, you should put them second. They're more familiar with your dam. But realize any person on this list is going to be contacted and representative of you and your dam during an emergency. So you want people who are willing to take that on. And then if you are, let's say, a bookkeeper and you have a bookkeeping role in your HOA, you can define your role here as well and just say, I'm a bookkeeper or, not an emergency contact. And that way you're included. And the last part is that you don't need to include everyone in your HOA. It really is not necessary because we know everyone has a different role to play in your neighborhood. And lastly, I want to talk about the components of an EAP. When we look at this, this is one of those places where you are really stepping up and defining your role and responsibility as part of your EAP. So these are new things that are in the template, and this is what I was talking about, low hazard category folks. We have guides such as the Guide to Deficiencies, which gives you examples of threats and emergencies that correspond with threat levels, as well as the FEMA Pocket Safety Guide, which basically goes over the threats that we talked about in webinar 1. Please reach out to us and let us know if you are interested in these documents. So when you are assessing your dam or looking at your dam, you have to know that there's 3 threat levels. There's non-emergent, which means there's something going wrong with your dam, but you can kind of keep an eye on it, and you really need to reach out to DHEC. The second is potential dam failure, where you can see that things are going wrong, but thankfully you have time to respond, and hopefully your actions will stop the dam from failing. And the last case scenario is that your dam is failing, has failed, or almost failing. And this is the worst case scenario. So when emergency management, when you reach out to them, they're going to automatically assume that your dam has failed. So now that you've kind of seen the worst case scenario, legally, you don't want to put your neighbors in harm's way if things go terribly wrong. And you want to be able to notify them and identify who they are and what needs to be done. And we do use dam breach modeling and inundation mapping in this point, but you also have to get names on this piece of paper. So DHEC, that is a big task. How are we going to do that? So the regulation requires that you identify and notify, but a strong plan should be the best plan, and it should include enough information to contact and identify the properties shown to be impacted by your inundation map. And for some of you, that's going to involve canvassing your neighborhoods and mailers and flyers and possibly going door to door to get phone numbers. Or emergency management may already have resources in place, which is why you really need to coordinate with them first. And during the planning stage for those larger impacted zones, DHEC can assist you to meet with county managers to possibly set up reverse 911 or code red systems and to help you with this effort. So you're looking at your dam breach modeling and you're saying to yourself, that's not what mine looks like. You're saying it's potentially impacted schools or parks. You're saying it's roadways or utilities. You're saying you see a downstream dam, and you want to know what is going on. Well, do we need to include this? And our stance is yes, it's best to identify everything. And then that way it customizes it to you. But at any time, if you see something and you have questions about it, please call us. The first thing with responding to any emergency is to stay calm. So we thought this section coming up was so important. That is the only tabbed item, and it is tabbed in red so that on the day of an emergency, you can find it quickly. So this that's tabbed in red is your call tree section. And really what it is that it is your first and most important action when determining an incident at your dam. This will guide you when responding to those 3 different threats. And we recommend that you include all 3 of those threats. The second thing is with this structure is that you're going to notice there's 2 DHEC numbers. You see the 1888 number, and then you also see the 803898 number. So during an emergency, the best number to reach is the 24-hour on-call emergency number, because those are actually linked in with district officers that are on call, and they can actually get out to your dam fast. The Dam Safety Assistance Line is also very helpful, but that is a person that's based out of Columbia, and we can provide a lot of technical assistance, but we cannot get the boots on the ground as fast as the 24-hour number. So you're going to notice that I have skipped over the non-emergent threat, and that is really because that is the first call really should be to the Dam Safety Assistance Line. So this call tree is really a default structure, and if it works for you, that's great. But a call tree really defines who is responsible and making what call. And in this case, in this scenario, the dam owner is going to call county emergency and the 24-hour number. But I'm going to introduce you to what I call best laid plans, because sometimes you can plan, but when an emergency actually happens, that all kind of goes out the window. And what happens is that, let's say you call the dam's technical assistance line, and through talking with us, we figure out that it's a more urgent or a potential failure. So communication is the key at this point, and we will call, as long as we set up the structure and we talk it through, we could call the 24-hour number for you while you call county emergency, and then everything else will go into place. So again, this is defining your role and keeping that communication open. Also, you can also get a call from, let's say, an upstream dam saying, hey, our dam has failed. And that you would need to probably include something along the lines of, you know, the way to implement your plan for that scenario. And also, you might be the one calling your downstream dam neighbor and dam owner so that they can get ready for what's coming. So it really should be customized to you, and you really need to keep county EMS in mind. So finally, with imminent failure, these are really I really want to just speak to the inundation property list, and that really does come from the inundation maps, which you've seen. But this is when setting up that reverse 911 or code red planning phase really comes into play. if you have that structure already built in, your phone call tree will look like call county emergency and call the 24-hour number, because you've already set into place the inundated property list. So just kind of keep that in mind and understand that that's why we've asked you to kind of plan ahead. I know for sure that FEMA in webinar 3 is going to expand on communication, risk crisis and communication. And so we're excited for you to continue with webinar 3. But we also wanted to, before we leave, we also wanted to touch base on Emergency Intervention Toolbox. And we thought this was the neatest thing. It was developed in 2016 as a collaboration between FEMA and the state of Montana, Department of Natural Resources. And we liked it so much that we're recommending for you to put it into your EAP. Now, even though it's downloadable to your phone, it is not an app. But you need to think of this as an encyclopedia of problem management for earthen dams. And if an EAP is an owner's manual, this is the service manual. So let's talk about the intervention toolbox. So the word intervention itself means to take actions to improve your situation. And knowing what to do isn't always clear. Sometimes you have little or no time to prepare or react in an emergency. So that's why this toolbox was developed, and it has case studies, response techniques related to effective interventions. The second thing is that you have time now to kind of look at emergency examples, identify different problems, learn this resource, and then fill it out so that you can include it into your EAP. So in order to effectively repair a dam, you really need to identify the problem. And you can't know what's going wrong or repair it right unless you know what it's doing. And that takes training and learning. Now, you can utilize this emergency intervention toolbox, but I'm going to just run this disclaimer that really this should be used in conjunction with dam safety engineers or engineering consultants. And this is just a basic way of knowing what's going to happen. Now, again, you can reach out to us anytime. And the other thing is that if you cannot gain control of your situation, that's when you really need to activate your emergency support system. So during an emergency, you really need to know if you can count on your resources. And we do really count on our resources. So part of that is knowing what the resources' strengths and limitations are. And we found that the calculators work great, but not on your phone and not in the Word format. It only works in the Adobe format. But what it can do, those calculators can calculate how much filter you need, calculate how many sandbags you need, and calculate how much pipe you need. But remember, you're not in this alone. And when you are responding to whatever's going on, you really need to sit back and look, is it working? Is it having no effect? Is it causing more harm than good? In that way, you can evaluate your actions and see how it's working. So this is just kind of a recap, but it's just a one-page slide that you can kind of put in with your emergency intervention toolbox at a later time. So hopefully you can all take a time to download this resource, learn the calculators, review some dam safety threats, learn the resource as a tool, and then incorporate it after. So these are symbols to note in an emergency toolbox. And I want to stress to you, these are labeled on the side of the paragraph. And I have clicked them, and they are not icons that you can click and go from one resource to another, but they are great symbols to let you know what's going on the page. First, The caution sign, it just means that you require extra safety considerations, such as don't walk into a running stream of water. The second is preventative measures, such as operation and maintenance, things to keep you from getting to the point that your dam is failing. And then the resource tile, which adds so much information. So we also wanted to let you know about the calculators. So first, again, it is only available in Adobe, and so I've kind of clipped out some information that we've put in previously. If you don't have it in Adobe, you have it on your phone, there's formulas in the paragraph or in the margin space so that you can hand calculate out and get a good estimate as to what's going on. And three, this made-up scenario, or it really can kind of let you check whether your Adobe is working. And this is a siphon calculation. What I really wanted you to know is how much detail you really need to know about your dam in order to make this work. You need to know your freeboard. You need to know your slopes. You need to know the length of the crest. You need to know the height of your dam. So that's why it's a great tool, but you really need to plan ahead and get this together before an emergency. And there are great resources available on this document, within the document in the appendix section. And they correspond to the emergency or threat. And there are videos that show people that I didn't realize that you would need 2 people in order to fill a sandbag and do it the right way. And they have videos showing and demonstrating that. So take the time to look at it. It's really, really neat. So one last thing, or 2. So Jeannie actually ran through the dams and inundation map, and that is on the South Carolina DHEC website, www.scdhec.gov/dams. I'm going to list it on the next page as our #1 resource, but I wanted to let you know about that. The second thing is, if the Dam Owners Workshop recording at 2018 is also available. So if you want to take the time to take a look at that as well, please do so. And again, this is the scdhec.gov/dams website, and we've kind of geared you towards everything we've spoken to tonight. And then just a recap of how DHEC can assist you. By providing tax map numbers, we can give you inundation maps and aerial maps. We provide technical support for EAPs. Can't stress enough, please reach out to us. We can help you identify your threat levels, and we can definitely connect you with the emergency managers to create those custom emergency notification plans. So, any questions? And if you're feeling shy or think of a question later, you can.
So I have captured a couple questions that were sent privately just to me as the host. So I'm about to put those into the chat for the panelists.
Well, okay. This is John McCain. I'll definitely can start as far as the first one, a checklist or guide for, there are, DHEC does not have an official one. There are multiple checklists and whatnot. We can provide, say, there are multiple variations of checklists and guides for self-inspections. So that's something, yeah, you can contact DHEC. We can give you, you can use the DHEC inspection form if you want. But then I think there are other checklists and guides that can be used. The second question about each individual dam owner communicating with the emergency management officials. Yes, the EAPs are provided to the county. However, we need to know from the dam owner when, you know, like if something changes, you know, we need to hear from the dam owner. You know, if you update or revise your plan, you send it in to us, and we make sure the county gets it as well. And then the third question is a really good one. And if you know, I don't know exactly how reverse 911. I know that there are. So the service DHEC uses to communicate with dam owners is called Code Red. And so that's the service where, you know, first off, you have to give us your information. And so the counties probably, I know several counties use Code Red. And so it's a system where, you know, the dam owner's responsibility may be to provide the downstream property owners the instructions for how to sign up for Code Red. But once their information is in the Code Red system, the county can then do those automated robocalls or automated you know, text messages. So the roles may be a little different, where the dam owner is not going out to collect phone numbers, but the dam owner is going out to instruct people how to you know, sign up for Code Red. Well, and
can I add something here, John?
Go ahead, Nick.
I'm sorry. First question about the EAP going to the counties. Many counties put the EAP in their county emergency operations plan. So it's extremely important that that information in that plan is up to date, as detailed as could be. And that's why we're encouraging dam owners to really have that one-on-one contact with the emergency managers, because it's an integral part of their plan. So if there's something that needs to be changed or updated, that they need to have their information. So I just wanted to make that point.
Thank you, Nick. And you know, I guess one thing, you know, the county emergency operations plan, that's the county's plan. That may have more like the evacuation plans and maps, whereas your dam may have the inundation map, or your EAP. The county has, you know, it's more focused on what areas it needs to evacuate. So that's kind of maybe some of the differences between what how the county's plans are shaped versus the dam owner's plans. And finding the residents' phone numbers, you know, that's, you know, maybe you do a mail out, maybe you do put flyers, or, you know, in mailboxes. You know, there's different ways to do that, but, you know, it's you know, I know that's probably the toughest thing for the dam owner to you know, to accomplish. It's, and then DHEC's, you know, DHEC's position is, you know, you have to at least make an effort, and some people may just not be willing to give their phone numbers. You know, and as long as, you know, the effort is made and maybe documented that you at least tried, you know, that may be sufficient. So another question: where are the visuals to show different stages of failures, and when and what type of notification? Okay, so that is in your EAP actually, and we showed there are two tabs actually. One tells you, like, if this event is occurring at your dam, is it, you know, it's either maybe it's a non-emergency event, or if this event's occurring, it's an imminent failure event. And then in our one of the appendices, it actually has some visuals that show kind of what some of these failure mechanisms look like. So those are in the EAP, you know, in two different places. So do we have those? Are those all the questions so far, Alicia?
Those are all the questions we received.
Okay. Go ahead and submit any more questions you may have. And, you know, also after tonight, if you still have questions or something, you know, comes to mind, you know, just email us at at the response@dhec.sc.gov account, and we will we'll again, just like we did after the first webinar, we'll be compiling all these questions and providing answers in a follow-up email. So I think we'll move on. If no other questions right now. Next step. So our next step. We have another webinar coming up in June, and I think Preston Wilson will tell you a bit about kind of what to expect. But I do appreciate everyone's participation tonight and the good questions, and so I think, Preston, why don't you talk about what's coming up in June?
Yeah, thanks, John. And I think you guys asked some really good questions, and especially one of the questions is how do you communicate to that population just downstream of your dam, and sometimes it's whether you communicate in that risk when there's a disaster, or just trying to make sure that you communicate that there's a dam that they live under. So those are some really good things, and you're going to be able to, and we're going to talk about some of those complexities of dealing with that community with your audience. A better understanding of the public to get that information, recognizing, addressing inherent communication complexity for those dam communities, and then learning about that public alerts and those warnings and those notifications. I think there was another question about that today, about the reverse 911. We're going to really get into some of that stuff and those public alerts and warnings for dam emergencies and how that flips. So if you want more information on that, John answered some of those questions a little bit, but we're going to be talking a lot about those type of questions in the next session. And again, it's on June 2nd from 5:30 to 7 o'clock. We're going to have some really good information about community communication strategies for dam and dam emergency. So we're really looking forward to you participating in that webinar. All right, and I guess I'll handle this. Continuing educating units. There's also 1 hour CEU available for community association certified managers. This course has been accredited by the Community Association Management Institution Certification Board, and each attendee must fill out a course evaluation and provide general contact information.
Okay, here we go, Preston. Thank you. We got a couple more questions. So here we go. So question 6. The inundation mapping is a great tool I plan to use. If I get lost, who do I reach out to for help using that model? And I'm assuming we're talking about the internet web, the web application where you can, the map that you can, look at the inundation areas and zoom in. And if that's what the question is asking, just reach out to any of our dam safety program staff, and just go to the DHEC website. I think you definitely can find us there. Your regional dam safety engineer is probably who I would recommend you reach out to first, just because how important that relationship is. Reach out to your regional dam safety engineer, and then if the question is asking about the actual DSS-WISE Lite that we use for modeling the dam failures, you can contact me, John McCain. I'll be happy to go through that with anyone who's interested. And then a recording of the webinar will be definitely, just like we did with the first webinar, this recording will be placed on the DHEC YouTube channel, and there'll be a link to that video, and we'll also, it'll be accessible through the DHEC Dam Safety website. And we can probably also provide the PowerPoint to anyone who wants that. So I think that's the questions. And so Alicia is going to be sending the evaluation for your CEUs for anyone who needs that. And as far as closing remarks, I think I've already I'll just reiterate how grateful and you know, glad we are to have such good attendance and participation. So on the behalf of DHEC, thank you, everyone. Hope to see or talk to you again in a month, and hope everyone, you know, is definitely being safe and cautious out there. And you know, listen to DHEC for, you know, for health advisories too. So you know, pay attention to what, you know, what you hear from DHEC. So that's all I have. Hope everyone has a wonderful rest of your evening. Preston, do you want to say anything? And I know we don't want to skip over our FEMA Region 4 representative this time. We'll definitely hear. We want to hear from our FEMA Region 4 dam safety representative.
Yeah, I'll just defer to Katie, but I think we've got a lot of good information in, and please reach out. I know we offered a lot of information. If you have any questions, need to digest it more, reach out, and we'll be happy to help you.
So this is Nick Flupsoff, and I don't have much to say other than the fact that a lot of what was spoken here too, as far as getting resources for your EAP, you can, you know, once you partner up with your local emergency manager, a lot of that information, a lot of questions you have probably will be answered as far as, evacuation and alerting and those kinds of things. We'll speak to that later on as well. But I think things went well tonight, and we'll be talking to you next month.
Hi, this is Katie Goolsby Brown with FEMA Region 4 in the Dam Safety Program. Wonderful information here today. Excited for the next two webinars, and we're just excited to have this technical assistance here in South Carolina with all these wonderful partners.
Thank you, Katie. And Argonne National Lab, so Molly Finster you'll hear a lot from Molly next month. So again, Argonne National Lab is one of our partners here, and they will be providing a lot of the experts and the subject matter for our next webinar. So I believe with that, wow, look at that, right at 7:30. I'm proud. I'm glad we sorry for last month, but we did it right this time. So everyone have a good evening. And, all right. Good night, everyone.
All right. Good night. Thank you.